Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today. As we gather today for this virtual session, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are all on treaty land. Specifically, I'm located in Saskatchewan on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. We also have panelists joining us who are on Treaty 4 territory. My name is Nikki Desjardins, and I'm the Engagement Specialist with Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation, or as many of you may know it, SHRF. In Saskatchewan today, there is no denying that the season has settled into fall, but I am grateful for the warmth of the sun and of my home, and for our ability to virtually come together and share this information today. All three hosting organizations today recognize and reaffirm our relationships with one another and our commitment to reconciliation. Today, let's open our hearts and minds to learning how we can better share our stories with one another to deepen these relationships and do these things in a good way. So today we are here to talk about sharing your research stories. Specifically, we want to talk a lot about plain language. I am so honored to be presenting today with my two colleagues. Heather Persson is the Director of Research Profile and Impact with the University of Saskatchewan, and Krista Baliko is the Research Communications Strategist at the University of Regina. They both bring a wealth of expertise stemming from backgrounds in journalism, but also now helping researchers at their institutions share their research stories. We also have a special guest today to bring us his direct experience in sharing his research story through media, interviews, publications, presentations, and much more. So thank you, Nazeem, for being here. I will let Krista give you that formal introduction. So the format for today, I just want to go over a little bit of the logistics. So we will be having a discussion, and then we'll have a bit of a question and answer format. So if you do have questions throughout, please feel free to use the chat box. As soon as I hand things over to Krista, I'll be monitoring that chat box to see whether the questions need to be answered right away. Maybe they're specifically for Nazeem. So we'll make sure to get those answered as we go along. But otherwise, we'll start with the chat box questions as soon as we get to that portion of the presentation. So yeah, today let's get straight into that discussion, talking about plain language and the importance of it, really all the way through your research, from application stage to promising results, and then sharing those impact stories. So Krista, I will hand it over to you, and we can go from there.
Great, thanks, Nikki, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks everybody for logging in and hanging out with us over your lunch hour today. I hope it is a fruitful discussion. Today's structure, as Nikki said, we are going to start with a Q&A. Now, our special guest is only able to be with us for about 30 minutes, unless he's having the best time ever. Then he might stay a little longer. But so if you do have specific questions, do get them in the chat box if you have specific questions for him. Then after that, we'll get to your questions. And of course, we also have some resources that we'll be happy to share with you after. So today I'm so pleased to be with you and to have Heather and Nikki joining forces to bring you this great presentation, as well as our special guest, University of Saskatchewan public health researcher, Dr. Nazeem Muhajarine, professor and chair of community health and epidemiology. He's got an outstanding record of research, teaching, mentorship, and advocacy on social justice issues, and has really emerged as an important voice for science-based information and fighting misinformation during the pandemic. And in order for that to have happened and for that to work, you need, or he needs, and as an audience, we need to understand what is being said. And so we're really excited that he could take the time and join us for a conversation on how to effectively share research with non-experts. So welcome, Nazeem, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Krista, Heather, and Nikki. I'm looking forward to this conversation, this next 25 minutes. And I'll just say, though, I'm not the chair anymore of Community Health Epidemiology Department in the College of Medicine. Dr. Ann Lees succeeded me, but I was the chair at one time.
Oh, I apologize for that.
It's all right. Yeah, I just want to correct that.
There was some misinformation happening.
Yeah, that's right. I thought I'll start there, right?
What a great first lesson. So maybe we'll just delve, now that we've got that cleared up, we'll maybe go right into the first question and just sort of thinking back to when you first started doing media interviews and sharing your research publicly. Were you intimidated at all to kind of start doing that? Or how were you feeling when you first started doing this?
Krista, I will answer those questions, the intimidation bit and all that. But let me just say that yesterday, Premier Scott Moore did some media interviews, by which I mean he talked to someone other than whose name is not John Gormley. In one of the interviews, I think, with Lisha Grabinski, our host here for CBC morning show, he said that all provinces had introduced lockdown measures. And I remember things a little differently. So this is a bit of a story, that I want to tell just to kick things off here. The first weekend after the university closed down, University of Saskatchewan and University of Regina, for in-person learning and teaching, which was really last March 2020. This seems like eons ago, much more than 19 months. This was the weekend after the Junos were supposed to have happened in Saskatoon, March 15th. These dates have been seared in my mind. I don't know about others, but it is seared in my mind. On March 22nd, which was a Sunday, so the week after the Junos were to happen, through a LinkedIn message, a message popped up on my phone that Sunday afternoon, and CBC senior investigative reporter Jeff Leo was messaging me asking to talk to me. I called him. It was in the afternoon, Sunday, but it was kind of the first week of pandemic. I called him and we had a 45 minutes or so of a conversation. The next day, Monday morning, the CBC radio had some clips from this interview in their morning news. And what I remember, I happened to be working. I listen to CBC radio when I'm working. I'm one of those people who can do that, and I want that kind of stimulation. What was played on the radio was a clip that said something about when a farmer in the prairies, sees an impending storm coming, he or they would usually take their flock home, their livestock, home to keep them safe from the storm that is brewing, and you can see storms a mile away, in the prairies because of the skies. And I use that as a bit of a metaphor, I guess, to say that the government of Saskatchewan should have been prepared for the pandemic, before we detected the cases, the first 2 or 3 cases that week. Since that first interview on March 25th, and in the intervening 19 months, I have done many media interviews in all platforms: digital, radio, TV, podcast, and local, national, international. Some weeks I think I've done as many as 15 to 20, media interviews and so on. Other weeks maybe 5. Today I've done 2 already, and since the 4th wave have crested and ICU capacity has maxed out, CTV News, the national channel, for example, has me commenting on their news channel kind of twice a week. I was just telling my partner they have a non-paid correspondent based out of Saskatoon, just commenting on what is happening on a weekly basis. So how did all this happen? And did I have any prior experience or had developed any skills or training? I've had quite a bit of experience talking to media before the pandemic. Most of my research were done in partnership with those in communities, municipal, provincial government, Saskatchewan Health Authority, and other organizations. So my research had public policy and practice relevance. And this has always been of media interest. The stories have been of media interest. So a couple of examples. Understand the Early Years research is one of them, which I partnered with local school divisions. A Smart Cities Healthy Kids study, which was also a study that we did with Saskatoon school divisions and City of Saskatoon. And in terms of, so the type of research one does matter. in terms of having some media interest, especially if it has, policy interest. Training. I think Framework Institute in Science Communication has been a major influence in my learning about how to talk to media effectively. Various workshops that University of Saskatchewan had offered, how to talk to media, for example, do's and don'ts. I listened to the science shows hosted by well-known science communicators like Bob McDonnell, Brian Goldman. In fact, I was interviewed for podcast episode The Dose by Brian Goldman and recently, and that is a highlight. Do I get intimidated? I think I've done this so many times now. I think it's kind of become almost a little bit blasé, a little bit second nature. But that I had to watch for that. I had to watch for that because it is never a good thing to be blasé about things. You always want to be on your feet, sharp, and prepared, for interviews. And we can get into that a little bit more.
Well, thanks for all that. That's a ton of information. And just because you've talked about how much you've done, can you think back to when you first started doing interviews? How did you first start connecting with media? Because clearly you've connected with them if you have Jeff Leo picking up the phone and calling you directly. So what was sort of your first step in saying, okay, I'm doing something, I think there is interest? How did you decide that you would go to media, or how did you get connected with media?
Yeah, so I think communications office at the university, has been a major broker, putting us in touch with, media people, pitching the stories, working with us to get a good story, a good pitch on paper, some quotes, a few pictures. These are all the things that you all do, Krista and Heather. This is I cannot say enough about, and you cannot, I never underestimate, cannot underestimate that help that I have. But once your name gets known, and once reporters feel like they had a good experience, and I feel like I had a good experience talking to a reporter, I think they seek you out independently. They don't necessarily go through the communications offices. In universities, they will just actually send you an email, or they will just sometimes these days actually people do call me and so on. So Nikki, Krista, the key thing is this: building a relationship, with the reporters. And it is important in anything you do to have those relationships. Nikki opened the session that way as well, opening yourself, opening your heart, your mind to working with other people. So building relationship is important with reporters as well.
So I would think that in some ways, building that relationship would involve responding to them pretty quickly when they're trying to get a call into you. What are some other ways that you try to maintain and build these positive relationships with reporters?
Plain language and using metaphors and short sentences. If you don't speak necessarily as you write, and so I think it is important to speak the way that you'll just speak to your friend, your partner, somebody who is really not really aware of what you do, but who can, but who's interested in knowing what you do. And I typically jot down the points that I want to speak to. I don't write down sentences, but I write down the notes, points. You have to answer questions directly. You cannot actually beat around the bush. You need to get to the question quite directly, if you need to provide some context before you get to the point, you need to tell them that you want to provide context, and then get to the point pretty quickly. If a reporter approaches you, want to talk to you, ask them what they would like to talk to you about, and if you're unsure what they want to talk to you, and also that helps you to prepare. during the interview, it's not a good time to look up information or to review your facts. So so you need to have some prepared time to prepare if that is what you need to do. At the end of the interview, most reporters will ask whether you have to add anything more, that wasn't covered. That would be a time that you want to leave with something that is quite powerful, with the reporter. If you think of something that you want to say that is related to the topic but wasn't mentioned but wasn't directly related to the question, know that you have the time at the end, to get to that. You don't have to squeeze that in, with the question that is asked, which you want to answer directly. Always, and this is a key thing during this pandemic, always better to talk from your own research and data, because you know the nuances, the detail, and reporters want to know some of that nuances and detail as well. And if you have data, like visual data, you can share that data with the reporter, even in an email after you have actually given that interview, a Zoom interview or phone interview. You can quickly send, you could ask them whether they like to see something that you could send. That kind of makes the point, through data. And sometimes they will publish that along with their story. So these are some tips and some things that I do, that I have found to be helpful, telling the story that they want to tell.
Yeah, for sure. If you have visuals or video and you are being interviewed by, that they can be used in the paper, and now everyone's connected with web and TV, and very often they will use those images, especially with context. And if you are following up after, have you ever had a follow-up where you've wanted or needed to correct information with a reporter or add something? And if you could just speak to that maybe briefly.
Yeah, not very many, given how many interviews are done. I actually been impressed how well the reporters summarize and write, what I kind of talk to them for 20 minutes and so on. I've actually developed quite a bit of respect and a huge amount of respect for what the reporters do, how well they can tell a story. I just want to say that. But there have been a few times where they got my name wrong. and it is easy to do. Particularly my last name, they will kind of invert the R and the J, and sometimes I will let it go. It's not big thing, but other times I'll just let them know that so it's been very minor corrections like that, and they haven't had to kind of update their story, or anything like that.
I mostly, and also wanted the people who are, researchers who are listening, that there are possibilities for those kinds of corrections, but more often than not, the information isn't wrong. I just want to go back to one of the points you made, which was about the few key points. The research that you're doing, and that a lot of the people on this call are doing, is really complex, and there's a lot to it. And so it really does come down to boiling down to a few key points per interview. I mean, it does also depend on what the reporter wants to know. Can you talk a little bit about how you decide on those key points? Maybe how many you tend towards using, and maybe some examples of how you keep track of that.
Yeah. So if you're doing a radio, a live interview, it's really 3 to 5 minutes. There are 6 minutes maybe, and you are supposed to talk for about a minute and a half, uninterrupted. Maybe 2 minutes max. So you have to be able to say a point, within a minute and a half to 2 minutes, not 4 minutes, by the way. You do need to break it up, that way. So if you are giving a 4-minute interview, really you could only tell 3 things. And, if you're giving a 6-minute or 7-minute interview, sometimes that happens, you can maybe squeeze in a fourth one or the fifth point. So I think that's kind of where how you organize your your conversation, and you know, Krista, one of the things that I really learned from that Framework Institute's training, I was part of there for a whole year, so not uninterrupted, but 3 or 4 visits to Alberta, to Banff of all places, which was nice, and the power of metaphors to reach into the worldview and assumptions, values, and emotions of your audience. We all have cultural models that we keep and carry in our mind. These are the assumptions, the worldview, our attitudes, our opinions, and we sift information through our cultural models. So I may give you a lot of information and facts, but what you're hearing might be something quite different, based on the filtering that goes on, that you carry in your, in the way you look at the world. We could call it ideology, but it is not just ideology. It is much more than that. Ideology seems to me like just specific to a political, for example, etc. But the cultural models are much more complex. It's value laden. It's the way it's the way that you think about the world. And so what we have to do is, in order to get our message through those cultural firewalls, models, we have to use metaphors that they are familiar with, they can associate with, in order to make a different point. So for example, I'll give you a metaphor in early childhood development, that mother-child attachment. The mother, looks at a newborn, the newborn looks back at the mother, and that is actually how that attachment develops in the first few weeks and few months and first year. And the metaphor we use is serve and return. Serve and return, or serve and volley, like a tennis match. You serve and return. You serve and you wait for the ball to come to your side of the court. You return. So that serve and return is important. Just as in tennis, it's important for a mother and a child, a newborn, to develop attachment, and so on. In terms of brain development, we can talk about brain architecture. That brain is developed, piece by piece, level by level, and pruning goes on at the very end, and if you're looking at child development, you can think of the certain parts of the brain as an air traffic control, that directs signals, that comes from one side to another for a response. So these are some metaphors these metaphors have been tested, and not all metaphors work well. So you shouldn't just actually dream up metaphors. Sometimes you do, right? We all do, I do, but what Framework Institute does is that they use cognitive science in order to understand how people receive message, particularly science messaging, information, and how they understand and make sense of that. And they test this out empirically, and then they come up with this core story. And so I want to tell you that if you're doing research and if you're communicating, like in this pandemic, I need to have a core story that I want to tell people, about vaccination, about how SARS-CoV-2 spreads in people, and how we can actually respond to this using public health measures. So I need to have a core story pat down, before I start talking to reporters. I may not be able to tell the whole story each and every time that I interact with a reporter, but I need to have that in the back of my mind. I cannot make it up as I go. I need to know that, and then I need to be able to deliver according to the question that the reporter is asking. An hour ago, a reporter was talking to me about testing, how test positivity rates are high here, but that may be a function of testing that we do, or change in testing. We are not testing asymptomatic people anymore. using PCR tests, so how would that affect the test positivity rate? So I need to know my core story, but now I'm applying that to identifying cases, using two different types of tests: rapid test, self taken, the self testing of rapid antigen test, or the PCR test. So that is kind of, so you have to have that facility, I think, prior to that. So quick takeaway: core story is important. It should probably be written down. So in writing, it sinks into your brain, and you need to know the points. What are the elements of that core story that could be delivered in points, and use metaphors, and use plain language and turns of phrases, in order to actually deliver what you're going to want to deliver.
So this is incredible, and we really appreciate all of these tips. And I want people in the audience who are listening to know that this is amazing information, but you don't have to do this alone. That's why we are here as your calm support, Nikki, Heather, and I, and other people on our teams, because what Nazeem is saying is absolutely true. Stories are the main thing that capture people's attention and also helps with their understanding. But if you've never thought of it in that way, or using these metaphors, don't think that now you have to go away and sit there and think of this on your own. These are tips and tricks, and then reach out to us, and we are here to help you with that. So while Nazeem is an absolute expert at doing this, we're here to help you as well. To get to that level. So, just to assure you that you needn't hang up from this call and go and start thinking about your metaphors and stories.
Krista, may I add about the metaphors? You could overdo it, so don't overdo it. If you have a 4 to 5 minute, live interview on TV or radio, I really think you could only use one metaphor or two at the most. You cannot use 4 metaphors. Then it is overabundance of metaphors, and it is not going to go into the story. No reporter is going to write 4 metaphors, in their story. Only one, maybe 2 at the most. If it is really good, the second one is really good and makes the point. So have metaphors ready. But don't overuse it. Don't think that now we have to put everything into a metaphor.
That's great. Krista, we do have one quick question I think will be great to wrap it up here with Nazeem. So Nazeem, if you could go back in time, is there any other advice you might give yourself when you started talking to the media? I think that just sort of speaks to your one key takeaway.
Would Krista, Nikki, you asking about whether I would do anything different, or what?
I guess thinking back to when you first started, what advice would you give now that you've had a little bit more experience?
Yeah. I think, I'll tell you, sometimes 50% of the time I do interviews, I feel like I could do it differently. Nikki, I want to, be quite straight about that. 1 out of 2 interviews I give, I want the time back, and because I want to do it differently. Other times, I feel like, well, I did the best I could. That is fine. One thing I would say is that you have to be prepared, and you have to be pleasant and congenial when you're talking to reporters. They are professionals just as you are. You need them, to tell the story, but they need you more perhaps because they want to tell the story. And respect them, work with them, respond to them every time that they call you, they send you an email. Respond as quickly as possible. Don't wait for 2 hours to respond. Respond within the first 15 and a half an hour if you can. And if you can't do it, just say so right away. Especially if you can't do it, tell them that you're not available, and work with them, because they want to tell a good story. using the information you have. They are not trying to put you in a bad light, and that is one of the things that I've learned really well, during this past 19 months, that they are not trying to tell you, put you in a bad light. They want to put you in a very good light, and so help them. It is easy to help somebody who really wants to tell a good story about what you do and what you have to say.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Now, it's been just over a half an hour. So do you have to go at this point then?
I'll take one or two questions, and then, perhaps I could.
Okay, Nikki, I'll hand that over to you then.
All right, so if you have questions that are specifically for Nazeem, perhaps we can get into that now. Can either put them in the chat or even just let us know, and we can let you unmute there, and feel free to just speak up. This is a fairly casual setting, so if you do have questions, you can turn your camera on. And I think after this long, we've all gotten a little more comfortable with that, so feel free.
Maybe in the interim, I'll just ask a little bit about social media and what role that plays sort of in your strategy.
Krista, I'm not on social media, and it's a deliberate and a conscious decision on my part. I work with people who are on social media, and they do actually tell me what is what's current and what I need to know from social media. That's not to say that I never would jump into social media. I just feel like for my to manage my time and my work will be that I cannot be on social media right now. But I do know one of the ways that social media has been used during this pandemic is that researchers are testing out their preliminary data, and they are sharing their preliminary data with other researchers, not just only with non-researchers, but other researchers. So tweets, a tweet thread might actually have real data, and then they get some responses to that, and they might actually finalize the paper after that. So I mean, I am missing that in a way, by not being on social media. But that is a very effective way of using social media if you have the time, inclination, and the ability, the fluidness to do that. I've basically gone with the regular media, and I'm fine with that right now.
You've done pretty well.
Yeah. Tanya, I think we have a question here from the audience, so I'll let Tanya speak.
Hi, thank you very much for that. Really helpful. I'm a scientist, and I've done a number of interviews, but I'm always a little bit of a control freak, as Krista knows, when it comes to representing the science. And, it recently came up with a reporter from Nova Scotia, and I asked to be able to look at the story before it came out. And of course, she didn't have time, and she represented me well. But I just wonder how you get over that, or let it go, or what do you do if the science gets misrepresented?
Tanya, I would actually get back to the reporter. Maybe not call, or but I will send an email. I will send an email and just actually let you know. I haven't had to do that, this past 19 months, but I wouldn't see why, why you wouldn't do that, because you want to be represented correctly, quoted correctly, your name spelled correctly, your institution affiliation mentioned correctly. Those are facts, and so I think I would do that, and when it is done, it is done. If they can update something, there was another time, Krista, going back, there was another time that someone mentioned something about people who are immunocompromised not being able to get a second dose or third dose, and I had to correct that, and I wrote, and she corrected it right away, so
Okay, that's great to hear. Thank you.
If I could just jump in on that, until January, I was the editor of the Star Phoenix and the Leader Post. So this is something I dealt with quite often. It's actually unethical or considered unethical for reporters to hand their stories over for review before they are issued. It's very different than the academic environment. Personally, I'm finding it great to be able to have people review it and make sure I haven't made any mistakes, but that's an important thing to understand, is that it can be a breach for them to allow review of the pieces. And it's always a great idea to very quickly let them know about errors, because they can immediately fix them online. And if you're having any kind of issue, those editors are there to help broker conversations and that kind of thing to make sure it's as accurate as possible. And of course, your comms teams are here to help you with those situations as well.
So Heather, is it okay to request your quotes for a story?
It is. I always I'd usually do it over the phone just to make sure there were no accidental breaches or that kind of thing. But absolutely, I think it's a great question to always ask. Can you just review what you heard me say? And usually it helps crystallize their message as well and make sure that there was no miscommunication. So sorry, Nazeem, I know this is your time, but I think that's an important point.
That's a really important point as well, that you don't expect to see a draft and correct them. My colleague Hassan had a question here on the chat, and it is kind of similar to Jeffrey's question as well. And it's really about the subject matter, the sensitivity some subject matters have, and somehow how if the story not told carefully with great consideration for the subject matter, you could be promulgating and continuing stereotypes and damage and so on. I don't think that's an easy answer to this question. I mean, what I would say though is that when you are dealing with a difficult subject matter and you have to use terms that you don't have an alternative right away, you need to tell, I think, the person you're talking with, the reporter, that these are difficult. Let them know that you are struggling, that you are sensitive to to these issues, and not all reporters, some reporters actually do want to, kind of write about a certain story a certain way, I think, so, and you need to be able to identify them, and so on. And but I think, and Hassan, I think there's no easy answer to your question. As much as possible, don't continue to use terminology, words, references that has been found to not helpful anymore, to use, so I think that, and tell the reporter that that you are dealing with some sensitive issues, and you want to be careful in the way that you are telling this, as well as perhaps they can consider that when they're writing. So just approach that very directly, just very directly. I think that the directness helps here, I think. Okay.
I wonder if there's any more questions for Nazeem, and then I can follow up with the follow-up question around my comment that it's an ethics breach for a journalist to have a story reviewed. Right.
Good. Maybe I should leave a little bit late for my other meeting at 12 o'clock. But thank you very much for the invitation again, Heather, and thanks, Krista, and really enjoyed interacting with you. And Nikki, we have worked together in the past. Looking forward to working again. And to all of those who are online, I see myself as a public servant in the sense that I am working in a public university, and the society has invested quite a bit in what we do, and getting us to where we are today. And this is how we pay back. This is how we give back to society. I mean, it's just very simple. It's just a trite thing to say sometimes, But we are public servants, and I think the public need us to tell them what they need to know. Decision makers, policy makers need us to tell them what we know that could direct and inform the decisions and policy that they make. Enjoy doing it, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much, Nazeem. Some great information.
Yeah,
Lots
I'll-
of thanks in the chat.
I'll circle back. Thank you very much.
Great,
Thank you. Yes, thank you for the opportunity to Chris to follow up on the practices of the journalists and that kind of thing. It is, I know, difficult sometimes, especially when you're working in an environment where reviewing and sharing credit and just documents are reviewed over and over again and input is given. With the journalists, they are expected to maintain a distance and that's their story to tell. And I've seen it happen where reporters relent and hand their stories over. And in particular, seeing what other people have said before the story comes out can be extremely problematic. Again, there is nothing wrong, however, with asking the reporter what they heard you say, how you're going to be depicted. You have every right to ask questions as well as the reporters, but it's just a good thing for people who are working with media to be prepared for that. They are not given final review of whether it's whatever medium it's in, you don't have access to review that. So it's something to keep in mind and to make sure that you're being clear with the reporters. It's also just a practical timing issue. The turnaround time on daily news is very short. So to have it reviewed by all the players is a practical issue as well. And anyway, I hope that answers that question.
Heather, I just want to jump in and say one thing is coming from being a reporter to the university. I remember the first time I was asked to have a researcher review it, my jaw dropped. And I mean, it was this immediate where I was like, oh, right, I'm not a reporter anymore. So, I mean, it's very much ingrained in the reporter as well. So, just to kind of add on to what Heather said, it's, I also enjoy doing it now with comms, but is not the practice.
Yeah, I appreciate the clarification from both of you. It still strikes me as a balancing of ethical responsibilities. We have an ethical responsibility to ensure that we're not helping to propagate misinformation or incorrect scientific information. If we don't get an opportunity to even have a look at what is planned to be put out, even if we have no control over that, I'm not asking or suggesting that we should have final say or rubber stamp authority or anything like that, but to simply say, that's actually not correct. What you're about to put out into the media, it does strike me that I have an obligation to do my best to ensure that that doesn't happen as well.
Yeah, I understand. I understand what you're saying. It's just that check and balance can't take place in the form of a review. So it can take place at the end of an interview by asking that question and that kind of thing. But in terms of the review as a practice to accomplish that, it's difficult. I would say too, and I feel a little bit like I'm not being faithful to my profession of 27 years, but it's important too to pick which reporters you're working with. I'm working on stories with. So I'm just thinking about that question about accuracy, that kind of thing. You can develop relationships with reporters where there is trust and where you see them being fair and balanced and it's not wrong to review which reporters you're working with. And that's another way to take care of your message and making sure you're going to be treated fairly. I'm asked to vet reporters quite often, or ask for information, understanding what outlets they're coming from. So that's something that comms can help with as well. It, you know, in my experience, reporters are very committed to the truth and being fair and want to hear people. There are certain perspectives sometimes that come into play. So again, in terms of that question about making sure that you're painted in a fair light, checking out who's asking the questions and if they have a certain motivation or approach on stories, it's very fair to check that out ahead of time too.
Right. Thank you for that tip. I wouldn't have known that. And also, I think one of the big takeaways I'm going to take from this is that if you want to check the accuracy of information that's coming in the story, your time to do it is as the interview is ending, which I wouldn't have thought about. So it's good to know that, you know, doing that stop and check and saying, okay, just to be clear, here's what I'm trying to say. Are we on the same page with that?
I think the other thing that's important, Chris, is something else that was mentioned. I can't remember if Heather said it or Nazeem, but also just that check in, and you can ask from the other end. So what was it that you heard me say, or, you know, kind of that as well. So you can hear it from their words, because the reporter is going to be writing your quotes, but the context in between is based on your interview and interviews possibly with multiple other people. And so you want to ensure that what they've heard as well is on point. So
yeah, and I'd like to add to that too, because I think that's where especially Krista and Heather for sure are such a great resource, and also to be proactive in promoting the story of your research. If you're proactive about that, you reach out to your comms units, you reach out to people, you run it by other people so that you can sort of practice, as Nazeem said, have your points, run that through so that you're not caught off guard, and you kind of are prepared in advance and you're proactive about the story of your research and what you want to tell and share, so that those interviews are maybe not the first time that you've kind of told that story of your research. So that's another really good thing. And yeah, Heather and Krista, myself, people in the comms world are very good at helping you to practice that message and shape your story so that it's not the first time you're sharing it when you're with that reporter.
yeah, it's a really great point, Nikki, and to that as well, just that, you know, if reporters ask you questions as well, and it's not part of the research study that you're talking about or part of the research, it's okay to say that as well. You needn't start thinking off the cuff and be giving information you're not prepared for. You can say, you know, that wasn't part of this study, or you can feel comfortable doing that as well. And part of that comes in with doing a little bit of the back and forth with your comms team if you want to do that before the interview, so we can work with you kind of on that front, because, you know, when you get asked a question, you really do want to answer it. I know that's the instinct, right? You want to be able to provide an answer, but you needn't be reaching for those kinds of things if that's not the story that you're there to tell. So just another point.
And asking for a minute if you need to gather your thoughts, or if you didn't expect the question, just to think, do I want to answer it? And asking for a little time and space. With TV, even, they can edit that portion out. But yeah, I think advocating for yourself and asking to be for fairness and space and to do the best job possible. Almost every reporter I know is going to join you in wanting to make sure that is accomplished for sure.
Heather, I wonder if you could answer or speak to one of the questions we had earlier in the chat. It says, in some past training on speaking to the media, we were told never to immediately say yes or no to a question. And I noticed that most people still do not do that. Is that the case?
So I think never say never. Sometimes you could start with a yes or no, but I think that in terms of being effectively heard, you do want to be able to give a fulsome explanation when you when you answer. So, and Nazeem talked about speaking in sound bites or in portions or length of conversations that can be used, especially for television. You want to make sure that you're giving a lively answer that isn't too long and can be used to fully explain. I think whatever medium you're speaking with, if you say yes or no, it's not usually enough to explain either to the audience or to the reporter the fullness of probably what you need to communicate. So, Krista, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
My thought is the reporter shouldn't ask you a question to which you can respond.
Very
yes
true.
No, but
that's right. No, that's lesson 101 in J school is don't ask yes or no. No,
but if you're getting those questions, it's about setting up the context, especially if that's the bite that they're going to be taking, right? Like you can then use their question to answer. That's kind of it, because you have to think about what the bite might be. So sound bite.
I would say if we can just talk about no comment, using no comment is something you do not want to use in most interviews, because it can be clipped in a way that looks like you're avoiding working with the reporter. So that's something that I would avoid saying. I think you want to build enough rapport with the reporter that you're explaining why you are choosing not to answer it, and maybe say what you can answer instead, rather than a no comment. That's usually something to avoid in interviews. So yeah.
And then no comment. I mean, that's kind of where that can come in. If it's no comment because you're not prepared for it, or it's fine it's fine to tell the truth.
Yes, I just think it's the term, right? Like to say no comment, I would. It's fine not to comment, but to say no comment so that it's on a recording, whether that's television or on tape, or I guess it's not tape anymore, showing my age, but digital recorders for interviews. It's just something to avoid using. It probably wouldn't be the end of the world if that was the beginning of how you explain that to the reporter, but usually something to avoid.
I think it piques a reporter's interest as well.
Yeah, that's right.
In a pretty serious way. So
yes. And are there any other questions? I know we have a package of resources that we are going to provide to everyone on the call today. So we ended up talking a lot about media and that interaction, but we also have some information, as Nazeem talked about, the training that he went through to be able to speak in a way that can be understood. All the researchers that I work with are very well established experts. So one of the things that you no longer have to do is establish your expertise with a reporter. They're going in usually understanding that you are an expert in your field, and you can focus on your messaging and saying something in a compelling way that, I think thinking about your audience is something that I would want us to talk about before we would leave today, and understanding that you need to pick a non-expert that maybe you run your messaging by. And so you've created those key messages and your story in a way that someone outside your field is going to understand. And that can be used not just for media, but whether you're talking to government. There's many opportunities for you to share and highlight and amplify your research that aren't necessarily media as well. So we're going to leave you here with some broader materials to help you in that journey.
I think, Heather, that's also something as a funder of health research, that's something even at the application stage with your work, just recognize that even the people that are reviewing your work, I mean, they may not necessarily be from your field. The review committees are made up of a wide array of expertise, and we do seek out specific expertise for applications, but it's really important, especially if these applications do get funded, as someone who communicates what has been funded on the other side, it is really great to see those engaging ways of telling your research story right from the application point. If a reviewer enjoys reading your application, I can guarantee you, you will have a stronger chance at being funded, because it's easy to understand and follow what you are wanting to do with the money that you will be granted. So that's just one of my key takeaways from this as well, that it starts even at the application stage of getting people on board with the idea of what your work is trying to do.
So should we pop up that, should we pop up those slides, or are we going to send them out? Just
Yeah, I think we're good. We do have a pretty detailed resource sheet with some links to other things. A lot of great resources. We've pulled them all together, our favorite places to go to share some things. But I also would encourage you to look out for some other webinars and things like that. One of the great ones in science communication that I have loved over the years is the Alan Alda Center for Science Communication, and he has a book and he is wonderful, and just really talks about relating to your audience. So that's one of the key takeaways, I would say. We have about 2 minutes left here, so I will be following up. We will pull together the recording of this session so that you can share it, go through it in some detail, back up to some of the important parts that we've talked about. But after that resource page is shared, please just always remember that we're here to help. This is what we do. This is why we enjoy the work we do. So yeah.
If I can just get a pitch in too, and I'm sure Krista has a similar one, but research profile and impact does have media training, since that's been the focus of today. We actually have taken people into the One Button Studio so they can try being on camera and get feedback. And so if that's something you want to grow, it is something that we'd love to work with you on, and know that you have a team.
yeah, that's my pitch as well. I mean, reaching out to us and I mean, again, Nazeem has been doing this for a long time, and so we went to, you know, someone with a lot of expertise, and we are here to help you so that you reach you know, a great comfort level and can feel confident and comfortable. So that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I just have one question. The recording will be posted. It will be posted on the SHRF YouTube channel, but we'll also share it directly with anyone that was registered today, so that we make sure that that's accessible. Yeah, and I think this is also another good example that just to remember that your comms people, from your funders to your institutions, are also working together and want to also work together to tell your stories and help you out. So I hope that's something that we see a lot more of, because we really enjoy doing it.
Maybe the wrap up is we are going to be sending out a survey, and in that survey there's going to be a question, so not only about today's session and how much you loved it, I hope, but also what you might be looking for in the future. The three of us are really excited about the number of people that were here. Shows us there's a need. So there is a question there that's like, what else would you like to see? Let us know. Because Heather, Nikki, and I, first of all, we love getting together and working out information, or working out these kinds of things. So let us know how we can help you out in another session like this. And thank you, everyone, you know, for coming. And here we are at 1:00. So should we close and just thank everyone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yes.
Take care.
Have a great day.
Thanks. Thank you.
See you, Tanya.
Bye.
See you.